I'm Simon Woods, President and CEO of the League of American Orchestras. Welcome to today's information session for our new Inclusive Stages program. We're thrilled with the response. We have more than 150 people signed up today from orchestras from all sizes from across our field. And especially, as I know everyone's incredibly busy getting ready for the new season. So I think we'll take that as a ringing endorsement of the urgency of this moment of collective action that we're talking about here and the seriousness with which orchestras are approaching it. So over the past few years, it's been great to see how deeply orchestras have committed to the really incredibly important work of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And the results in many areas across our field are quite encouraging. The repertoire is broadening, orchestras are making strenuous attempts to diversify their boards and staffs. A new generation of women conductors is finding great success and public acclaim. And the quality of conversation across our field, which I think we felt very strongly for those of you who joined us at the conference in Pittsburgh this June, that quality of the conversation has never felt more intentional or real. But as the League's recent demographic report makes starkly clear, collectively, we've been quite unsuccessful at diversifying the musician bodies on our stages, however wonderful the music that is made, and it is. At the League, we regard this as one of the absolutely definitional issues for the next decade, for justice, for orchestras to represent the demographics of this country, for the perceptions and expectations of the world around us, and for the enhanced creativity that diversity brings to our work. And it's that conviction about the importance of this change that has led us to the launch of Inclusive Stages. So we're absolutely thrilled that you have chosen to join us today for this event. Before we go any further, I want to say a very sincere thanks to the Sakana Foundation for support of the pilot year of Inclusive Stages. We couldn't be more grateful for the vision and generosity that's allowed us to launch this program today. It's no overstatement to say that this is one of the most important programs the League has embarked on in many years. So the program will be led here at the League by our Vice President of Inclusion and Learning, Kane Thomason-Reedus, who many of you will know. Kane brings not only a background as an orchestral flutist, but also his own lived experience as a musician of color working in our field. And I'm tremendously grateful for him for the idea, really, and the conception and development of this program. And also to our VP of Research and Resources, Karen Yer, who'll provide critical contributions in the all-important data components of the new program, which you'll learn about shortly. And then rounding out the program team is our new Manager of Inclusion and Learning, Sam Andrew, who comes to us with a wealth of experience in classical music, project management, and work in diversity and inclusion, and we're very happy to have her as part of the team. So, Kane, I'm glad to see you're online, and great to see you, great to see everybody here. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass it to Kane to lead us through the session, and many thanks to everybody for being here today for this important moment.
Thank you, Simon. I appreciate it. I wish I could see all of you, but I really appreciate you being here. I'm going to share a screen and walk us through the entire program, which will include a couple more introductions. And my apologies, there is construction going on in my street. Hopefully that sound is not coming through as loudly for you as it is for me, but here we are. All right, so as Simon was just telling you, we are incredibly grateful for this moment where all of the work that many of us have been doing for years is gaining momentum. So thank you for voting with your presence here and with the work that you do every day. We want to set just a bit of context as to how we arrived at this spot, both as the League and as our field. For our League of American Orchestras, we've recently redefined our vision and mission. We now state our vision as being a thriving future for orchestras and their communities that celebrates creativity, artistry, and inclusion. And our mission is to champion the vitality of music and the orchestral experience, to support the orchestra community, and to lead change boldly. Within those overarching themes for us, we have 5 strategic priorities that we've identified. One of them is accelerating the pace of change in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I'll just say as a preamble that that is our version of recognizing that, again, there is much work being done. I personally appreciate that. We as a team appreciate that. But I think for many of us, we've seen that our goals are not coming to fruition as quickly as we'd like. So we want to accelerate that pace of change and support the entire field in doing so. So to make that explicit, we said that the League is committed to threading the values of equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout its work, with the ultimate goal that the field reflects and embodies the diversity of this country. And I'll add the bit of detail that that is our goal for the field of orchestras, that for a national field, a national art form, it makes sense to us to seek to reflect the diversity of the entire country. We acknowledge and support the fact that diversity is going to mean something slightly different for every orchestra. So whenever we are speaking about diversity, we will speak in terms of what we seek to support across the nation and across the field. And we want to support you in determining what that means for your particular orchestra and your particular community. To that end, we have a number of resources we've been providing and building over time. Your one-stop shop, your first place to go, can be our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Resource Center. These links will be live in the document that we send out to you that includes these slides, as well as the video and transcript and links for further action. So in each of these cases here on this slide, you see different assets that we've provided, different bits of research, different funding results that we've achieved through things like the Catalyst Fund. This is part of the body of work that we've dedicated to EDI over the years. Amongst that large portfolio of work is our participation and leadership within the National Alliance for Audition Support. Many of you as orchestras and some as individuals have been a part of that process, so thank you. There are dozens and dozens, almost 200 orchestras that are participating in this on a regular basis through its funding initiative and through the Orchestral Partners Audition. So we really appreciate it, and we look forward to more collaboration there. Another important aspect of work that we've done quite recently, and hopefully you've caught wind of through our direct communications or at conference or just through your own reading. It's our Racial and Ethnic and Gender Diversity in the Orchestra Field in 2023 report. This is the follow-on report to the last one that we did in 2016. And it is, it was definitely, I guess I'll call it a labor of love, but it was definitely a labor. There was a lot of work and integrity put into this. It speaks again to race and ethnicity as well as gender across all roles in the orchestra. I recommend that you look at some of the technical terms to make sure you're understanding what we're talking about if you are to look through the report. For the purpose of today's webinar, this information session, I'm just going to focus on the one aspect of musician racial and ethnic diversity. What we see in that report, which is the continuation of a longstanding trend, unfortunately, is that Black or African American, Hispanic and Latinx, Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, and American Indian and Alaska Native representation is significantly lower among orchestra musicians than in the US population overall. So all of those categories are significantly lower than what we see in the US population. Again, you may want to keep in mind what your unique community includes and what may be your emphasis, but across the country, that is what we see. And the trend that we've seen, continuing a long-standing trend, Black or African-American musician representation improved at a slower rate than that of any other racial or ethnic group, increasing only very slightly during the 10-year period that was studied in this report. Now, there's a lot of reasons why that is an important fact. The main reason I want to bring up in this context is that there have been many people over the last few years who hoped and certainly intended for that trend to change in recent years. Since the murder of George Floyd, there has been a significantly increased effort across our country to improve understanding and relationships with Black communities and their orchestras. And we've seen improvements in various parts of the orchestra. We have not seen an improvement in the musicians, and I will share a graph that shows you that. So this is pulled from the report. I acknowledge this is very small for you looking at on your screen. So bear with me, I'll point out a couple of the metrics. And again, you are welcome to reference this from our site. What you see is the trend line starting back in 2014, continuing through 2023. And there are a couple of categories that go up. So that is definitely good news. Many don't go up significantly, as we've talked about. But if you look from 2019 to 2023, we actually see, excuse me, a net downward trend in the African American line, the Black or African American line, which may appear as green on your screen. That line, excuse me, has actually decreased since 2019. So in the exact period of time where we know that our efforts have increased, and we want to believe that the impact has increased, when it comes to musicians on stage, that has not been shown. Therefore, what do we, as the field of American orchestras, do? This is where we arrive at the need for this program. Inclusive Stages is our goal of increasing the racial diversity of musicians in American professional and community orchestras. There's an important acknowledgement here that in order to do that, we will absolutely need to work with every level of education across this country, including our own youth orchestras within our own League of American Orchestras. But for this particular phase of this particular project, our goal is to have a quite focused conversation on the opportunities, the tools, the methods that are available to us immediately right now as the organizations which place adult musicians on stage in performance as professionals and volunteers. We function differently than the education system. We cannot work apart from them, but we have our own accountability and our own opportunity here. So this phase, this initial phase of Inclusive Stages, is focused on professional and community orchestras. In imagining this work and in discussing this work with every possible constituency, and in our own core beliefs as the staff members leading this, want to share our guiding values with you. And we truly welcome your feedback on this. We've distilled them down to 4. First, musicians will always be included in this project. This project is about musicians. It is about musician representation. It is about the experience of musicians. It is about the impact that musicians can have on our organizations, on our communities, and through our art form. So musicians will always be at the center of this. Second, the perspectives of musicians of color will always be prioritized. This gets at the bit of a tricky situation where, as marginalized populations, musicians of color are often looked to be the solvers of the problems. And there certainly is a major contribution that can be made there. But it is neither ethical nor sufficient to simply rely on the marginalized to solve the problem. So the perspectives of musicians of color will always be prioritized. And at the same time, we all need to be cognizant of the experience that those perspectives refers to. It may be negative, it may be positive. Whatever it is, we need to take up the responsibility ourselves as the leaders of the field, as the staff members responsible, as fellow musician leaders, as colleagues, as volunteers. This is a collective effort. You all will determine your own goals and actions. So a tenet of ours here at the League, and certainly our department through this program, is that we will not prescribe the very specific solutions that you may want to employ. Your orchestra, your musicians, your staff, your leadership will decide what is the best scenario for you. We will do everything we can to provide ideas, to provide information, to provide best practices. In the end, every orchestra chooses their own exact path. Fourth and final here, to make change quickly, we will focus on actions that are available to us within our existing agreements. So we, for this phase of this project, are going to focus on what can be done right now. Assume that no rules are changing, assume that no negotiations are involved in any of this, simply with the current rules of engagement, what tools and methods do we have available to us? At this point, we get into some of the details of the program itself. And let me pause for just a moment to say that we do have the chat open, we do have the Q&A open. We will certainly look for questions that we can answer in real time. We will also save time for questions at the end. And for those who are interested, there are Q&A sessions that are actually live interactive. We all get to be on the screen together, that are taking place next week and the week after, and we'll give you information about those. So this is very much about presenting you with our information and asking for your feedback, your questions, and your participation. So a summary of the program itself. Inclusive stages will propel the field's work to increase musician racial diversity in American orchestras in two distinct ways. The first is data collection and analysis. That is our attempt to determine what information is missing. The second is orchestra coalition building, and that is to look at what collaboration has been missing. How can we change that and make this different than all the other previous efforts? At this point, I wanted to hand it over to Sam Andrew, who has done an incredible job bringing this into reality, and she's going to discuss some of the details with you.
Thanks, Kane. So as Kane mentioned, there are two major paths in this work. There's the data collection and analysis, and then there's the coalition work. And the data collection and analysis consists of three distinct projects. First, we'll talk about them a little bit more in depth in just a minute, but I'll do a brief overview right now. First is the inclusion index, which essentially consists of self-reported experiential data from staff and musicians in orchestras. The second is the audition applicant demographic survey, which is a survey that orchestras send out to their audition applicants, and those applicants voluntarily self-report their data, which is then sent back to the orchestras and to the league. Finally, the third data project is the Audition and Tenure Practices Survey, which just seeks to help increase understanding the variety of audition practices and their prevalence in the field today. The Orchestra Coalition work, we'll talk about this more in a minute, but it really is involving stakeholders from all across the orchestra and the field to bring them together and really increase the collaboration across all of these groups. We foresee a few different participation options. The first is, next slide, King. Thank you. The first is as a data partner. So orchestras may want to participate in one or more of the three data projects without actually being involved in the coalition itself. There's a lot of flexibility in which of the data projects an orchestra may choose to participate in, and that's entirely up to the orchestra to decide. However, there is also the full coalition commitment, in which orchestras will commit to participating in all aspects of inclusive stages, and through that, they will be recognized as formal members of the coalition, and there are additional benefits that come with being a full coalition member. Coalition members will be doing all of the data projects, all three data projects, as well as the additional coalition work that we'll discuss. Additionally, there are options for individual musicians and other stakeholders. We, as Kane mentioned, we want to make sure that we are prioritizing the experience of musicians, and particularly musicians of color. And so we are going to have this option to have them participate in the coalition meetings. And then we also think it's important to make sure that other stakeholders, such as our union representatives, are invited and that they feel that their voice is heard throughout this process as well. And with that, Kane, I think it's time to dive into the data projects.
Thank you, Sam. And a note here, Karen Year was hoping to be able to join us to discuss this with you. This is very much her work and her passion. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here, so I am covering it for her. You can give your comments to Karen. So I'll do my best. So the inclusion index is, first of all, it's a response to something that we've actually been asked for since I arrived. Literally since the first week I was on staff at the League, I have been asked for some type of a tool, a survey, some type of research that would help orchestras look at their own equity, their own diversity, their own inclusion. In this case, we are able to proceed with an inclusion index. So in joining this initiative, you'd be able to understand the belonging and inclusion among your musician and staff members. We understand there are lots of other important stakeholders and constituents within orchestras. At this point, we're able to move forward with specifically musicians and staff. Our intent for this information is so that then you can focus your EDI efforts where they are needed most, where you can reinvest in the areas where you see traction, where you can rethink the areas where you don't see traction, and simply have a better understanding of the experience within your organization. I won't go through all of the details on the slide, but they are available to you afterwards in the slides that we send to you. It's important to note that we are doing this in partnership with Accordant Advisors. They have already worked with several orchestras of various budget sizes on this very inclusion index. So it was already very much tailored for orchestras, and we are continuing to work with them to further tailor it to the orchestral experience. One example of that would be that there is what we call branching, where if you indicate that you are a musician responding to this, you are going to have a slightly different set of questions, or at least different wording to the questions than you would if you're a staff member, so that we're able to distinguish, for instance, between relationship with a music director and relationship with an executive director, or a reporting relationship of that kind. The other most important aspect of this is to understand that this inclusion index is available for free for up to 150 orchestras. That is a huge savings. It is also with certain limitations. It is definitely the index report that all participating orchestras will have and that will be available to all League members. But it's also a tailored report for your specific orchestra. The degree to which it is tailored is not the same degree that you would get if you were going in on a bilateral relationship, one orchestra specifically with Accordant. That opportunity allows orchestras to tailor it much more, to have much more fine-tuned responses. So we certainly don't discourage anybody from pursuing that. There's a lot of value to be gained there, but this is a great benchmark, a great baseline that we can all access. And again, it will be free for the first, essentially for up to 150 orchestras. And in that group of orchestras, we will be giving priority to the orchestras that do join the coalition. And we'll be talking about that more in a moment. Sorry, it's not responding. The second data project, I'm going to hand over to Sam.
This, the audition applicant demographic survey is developed in partnership with Accepted and the National Alliance for Audition Support, or NAS. This is actually currently in use by many orchestras that are NAS orchestras. And it is a voluntary, as I mentioned, self-identification form that is hosted through the Accepted platform. It's a short survey focused primarily on race, ethnicity, and gender. And notably, this survey is free for everyone involved. There is no cost to the orchestra to use the survey, and there is no cost to the applicants to submit the survey. So that is a great opportunity to gather this data. It's a great opportunity for orchestras to start to understand what demographics they are getting through their applicants. So the way that this process works is orchestras would sign up with Accepted, and we will submit, or we will send out the link to sign up at the end of this session. But they'll sign up, and then they will just need to send out the links directly to their audition applicants. Orchestras will automatically receive all of the anonymous data from their applicants, And the League and NAS will receive aggregated data from all of the auditions and all of the applicants that use the survey. And Kane, I think
I'm next, and I actually want to add one detail to this, just context that this is the same survey that is currently being used by some orchestras through NAS. And the key difference here is that we are expanding it for use by any and all orchestras. So if you are an orchestra that is already using this particular part is not news to you, but there are many orchestras who are not currently using it. And this is going to give us a chance to make it much more standard across our entire field, which also gives us a much better sense of the overall applicant pool. And with that, I will go on to data project 3. This is something that we felt was important to actually develop with the coalition after the coalition is formed. So working with the orchestra coalition, the League is going to develop a survey that achieves these two following goals. First, the survey will help us understand the variety of audition and tenure practices across the field and how frequently we see each of those. And a couple of examples here. We commonly refer to screened auditions or blind auditions, but we know that's actually a quite diverse set of audition rules, which may involve 1, 2, 3, 4 screened rounds. It varies, and so we need to have a better understanding of that. The second goal is to highlight the existing flexibility within our current agreements, within our existing approved practices, and identify which may be best practices that orchestras can employ, again, within current agreements. So we're looking for what change is possible right now. That brings us to the coalition itself. We've been talking about this coalition of orchestras for a while, and so we just want to get specific about what we mean there. This is what we consider to be a historically significant initial phase of what is frequently called collective action. So collective action, of course, many voices working together towards a common goal. There are much more technical descriptions, but that's the working description for the moment here. This coalition is truly for the orchestras that are in a position where they feel they can act right now. So we at the League work in many ways to support EDI across our field, and we completely understand that there are many different realities for orchestras in terms of how they work in EDI, how they feel they can work in EDI. We know that as a diverse set of circumstances. This project itself is going to be focused on quick action that can create several I'll say several levels of results, and I'll talk about that in a minute, on a fairly quick timeline. This is not at all the complete project we imagine, but to get things started, we need to move quickly. The intent is to actually prove that any professional or community orchestra can take steps right now, and that's by including groups from all budget sizes and all geographic regions. So as part of our kind of recruitment and curation effort, we're going to make sure that we don't lack any budget group or any major geographic region in the country. It's important that this becomes a proof of concept, that if an orchestra wants to make change right now, that it can. The benefits, the activities are going to be to share the information, align efforts, and learn from each other's successes and failures. We will be establishing a new benchmark for change in our field. Hopefully we are going to break this logjam and show that we can change some things that have been thought to be intractable. Subsequent phases, we will look forward to expanding and involving the ecosystem of musical pathways programs, which includes, of course, our own youth orchestras within the League, higher ed, festivals, a lot of other partners that we know are critical for the long-term success of any musician diversity effort. For right now, the coalition is going to receive priority for the free participation in the Inclusion Index. And for groups 5 through 8, the smaller budget orchestras, we have designated a certain amount of funding that we can provide to support travel to the in-person meeting that we're going to have later, which we'll be talking to you about in just a moment. What it means to be in the coalition. What are our expectations? We're asking for 3 types of engagement here. First, we do ask for a commitment. We ask for an orchestra to commit to participating in all meetings and data projects. The meetings will be scheduled in collaboration with the coalition, and the data projects have already been described. We do ask that every orchestra set their own goals, determine their actions, track their progress, and share their results within the coalition. We will provide all the framework for that, but we ask that every orchestra do that. We also ask, this may seem small, but it can be big, that every orchestra designate one person as their primary contact. And both Sam and I thank you for that. Then, to assure that we have at least awareness across the organization and a level of accountability, we will be asking for you to document the support of the executive director, the music director, at least one musician representative as determined by the orchestra, and the board chair. That's something that we can get into further in later meetings, for instance, the Q&A, and will be described in detail in documents that we'll provide to any orchestra that is interested in joining the coalition. Third level, we are asking for actual engagement from just a bare minimum of the executive director, the music director in some capacity, which we will speak about in just a moment, and again, at least one musician representative. Every orchestra is going to have to decide for themselves what is the right representation of musicians. We leave that to them. We will certainly discuss different options, look at different models, but we know that there is not one form of representation that makes sense for all orchestras. So when we say that word engagement, what are we talking about? First of all, it is not a prescriptive list from the league. And second of all, there's no exhaustive list. It is really open to our own creativity. Just to provide a few thought starters, we wanted to note these options or possibilities for these few roles. An executive director certainly has a role to play in showing the priority that this work should receive across the organization. This could be expressed through staff goals, through work plans, through any number of means available to the executive director. We also invite the executive director to personally participate in coalition meetings. We know that may not always be possible, but there will be certain times where their leadership, where your leadership, if you are an executive director, is going to be critical. Second, and the biggest list here, the music director. We know no two music directors are alike. They all have very different styles of engagement with the orchestra, and typically orchestras have very different ways of working with their music directors. So again, we don't know what the best fit is going to be for your orchestra, but here are our thoughts. One, they have an important role to play in communicating the importance of the work. Again, maybe it's not from the podium, maybe it is, maybe it's in meetings, whatever it is, the music director speaking on this topic is different than the music director not speaking on the topic. We do invite the music director to participate in meetings with musicians, staff, and board internally within their own orchestra. We think that would be a healthy way for these proceedings to go throughout the project. Third, the music director has obviously a personal role to play in recruiting musicians of color to auditions. Many music directors within the CBAs have the right, and some would say the responsibility, to recruit musicians directly into auditions and at various levels of those auditions. That is an opportunity for them to seek out the best musicians of color for their auditions. This is an opportunity that takes no change and is simply a decision that can be made. And we at the League, and through things like the National Alliance for Audition Support, through the Sphinx Orchestral Partners Audition, through many networks that we can tap, can help support that effort. We do suggest, and this is already recommended in the NAS recommendations on audition and tenure, that learning about and addressing bias in hiring and tenure processes is important. And we feel that's something that the music director, as the person actually making the hiring and tenuring decisions, should feel some responsibility for. And we acknowledge that in some places that may be a culture shift. So I am not ignorant to that, but that is something I think we need to be ready to discuss. Lastly, we certainly invite and encourage any music director to participate in the coalition meetings. We know that will be more possible for some. Some will feel that more attractive than others, but the bottom line is we will be stronger for every music director that participates with us. Last group here, musicians. This really comes down to advocacy, in my opinion. Communicating with and involving more musicians, working through the existing committee structures to make sure that this work of inclusive stages isn't limited to one or two people. Participating personally in coalition meetings is incredibly important. There's a lot of other ways that musicians can get involved. And again, I leave that mostly to them to decide. We'll discuss options, we'll discuss ideas, but really participation and advocacy are the two biggest bits of allyship we could ask for from musicians. So what can the orchestra itself do? Here's a quick list. I'm not going to read through it, but this again is available to you in the slides. There are a number of existing ways right now that an orchestra could take steps to improve its own diversity and its own talent pool. So some of these involve actual expense, some do not. Some are decisions that people are already authorized to make. Some may lead to bigger discussions. So we certainly acknowledge not all of these are simple, but we offer them as starting points. And lastly, we get to the coalition meetings themselves. So when we talk about this group of orchestras and important stakeholders and meetings that we're going to have, when, where, and how are these going to occur? We are envisioning this as a 3-step process for this first phase of inclusive stages. And oh, and I apologize, Sam, you're supposed to cover this. I was stepping right all over that. I was thinking it was for the next slide. I apologize. You will do a much better job than me. Go ahead.
As Kane was alluding to, we do have kind of a 3-step process. The first meeting is primarily, we're hoping it's going to be in the early fall. And again, all of these dates will be decided with the coalition. We're not going to just pick a date and expect people to show up. But this first meeting will primarily be for musicians, executive leadership, and artistic leadership within orchestras. And around this time, we'll be asking orchestras to confirm their priorities and their short-term goals. We will be providing all the framework and necessary documents to help support orchestras through this process of developing their priorities and their short-term goals. And we'll be discussing all of this as a group in these meetings. In the late fall, that meeting will primarily be for musicians and the relevant staff. It might be the general managers, it might be personnel managers, it might be other staff members that orchestras that are specific to individual orchestras. And in this meeting, we'll be focusing on immediate actions and metrics and how to track those metrics and measure progress throughout this process. Finally, in January, we will be meeting in person in Detroit. All coalition participants are welcome and encouraged to attend. In this meeting, we will be sharing status of current efforts that have been ongoing. We as a league will be sharing our findings from the data projects that we're launching starting today. And we will be working with orchestras to determine longer term goals for years 2 through 5. And then those will also tie into longer term priorities for inclusive stages as an entire initiative. So the first 2 meetings in the fall will be virtual and the final meeting will be in person. Next steps. So there are a lot of options to move forward with your participation in inclusive stages. First, you can discuss with your orchestra, what is the right level of involvement for your orchestra? Are you going to be a data partner? Are you going to be a coalition member? What is the best fit? If you do have questions, please feel free to register for one of the Q&A sessions. We will be sending out links for those registration pages after this session ends today. And we have 2 Q&A sessions available next Wednesday, August 30th at 2:30 p.m. and the following Thursday, September 7th at 12:30 p.m. Both times are in Eastern. Those sessions will have a cap at 25 participants. So please register early if you're interested in having a conversation or asking Kane and I questions directly. If you know that you're ready to participate in the data project, we will be posting the links to sign up for those this afternoon. And so you will be able to just go in and sign up, and for the audition applicant demographic survey, you'll be able to start and using that as early as later this week. For the inclusion index, we are going to have a period of registration, and that period will end September 13th, after which you will receive your materials to start using the survey. If you're ready to join the coalition today, we will also be posting the link to sign up for the coalition. And again, we will be sending out materials later on in the coming weeks for those orchestras that do sign up to join the coalition. I think we've got some questions in the chat.
Yeah, I can start answering a few of these right now.
Perfect.
First of all, to answer one of the questions, an important reminder for all of you who have registered for this webinar will receive probably tomorrow afternoon an email from us that includes the video and the transcript of this webinar, as well as the slides and links. So every bit of information that we have said or shown will be available to you, and you'll be welcome to share. And it will also be posted on our website. So there will be no lack of access to it. Working through the questions. If an orchestra participates in the Inclusion Index survey and decides at a later time that they'd like the paid, more in-depth version of their individual index, would Accordant be able to provide that without resurveying the respondents? That is a question definitely for Accordant, and I know they would love to have that conversation with you. I can't say whether that's a yes or no, but I guarantee they are creative and eager to work it out with you. There was a related question from an orchestra that has already done work with Accordant, and whether or not that original survey data could simply be incorporated into this initiative. Accordant is in contact, has already notified all of its current orchestras of this Inclusive Stages project and the potentially overlapping work. And so I believe it is their intent to work directly with the orchestras to figure out what to do with that data and how it can potentially be ported over. Obviously, the surveys are not identical. So that is something that they'll discuss with each orchestra that they've already done work with. Another question now, is there a way that freelance orchestras whose CBAs do not allow auditions can participate or support these efforts? Short answer, I will say, is yes. And then it certainly will be a slightly different process. If you don't have auditions, you still have a process of selecting musicians, and that may produce some other really interesting results for us, some new options that weren't coming up otherwise. And as a professional orchestra, you still have an important role to play in diversity on your stage. So we will figure that out. Please be in touch with us. Next question, if an orchestra is in the midst of a music director search, can that particular endorsement be skipped, at least until an MD is announced, perhaps substituted by chair of orchestra committee or concertmaster? Absolutely yes. And thank you for raising this point. We understand that not all orchestras currently or sometimes ever have music directors. In the event that your orchestra is without a music director, we would recommend that you replace their endorsement with that of a second musician. But that is also something that we could discuss with you, and we will certainly be flexible there. We do not want an orchestra excluded because they don't currently have a music director. Next question. Will the January 25th in-person meeting be aligned with Sphinx Connect 2024, which I see is January 25th to 27th in Detroit? Absolutely yes, it certainly will be. Sphinx Connect begins the evening of January 25th, and our in-person meeting for Inclusive Stages will take part in the morning and afternoon. So yes, we are working directly with Sphinx to make sure that we are aligned and that we're collaborating on communications. Next, do you imagine a yearly cycle for the coalition sign up? For example, if we can't organize to join the coalition this season, will you be taking more orchestras on a rolling basis? Short answer is yes, we hope so. We can't yet speak to exactly what the future years of Inclusive Stages are because this is all a work in progress, but we definitely will be opening up opportunity for more orchestras to participate in this work one way or another. I promise you that. Next question. With what frequency will the audition demographic survey results be sent back to our orchestra? Here is one of the great parts about the accepted survey. As the account holder for that particular survey, for that particular orchestra account, you get the results in real time. You literally can have an email sent every time somebody submits one, or you can simply get the digest, or you can just go into the portal and look anytime you want. There is no lag time there. We as the league will be receiving all of the respondents. You as the orchestra will receive your own respondents. Next question.
If I could just jump in
yes,
really quick.
Please do. Go ahead.
For that, the kind of caveat is that Kane's response is completely accurate as long as orchestras are using the live version of accepted. There are some orchestras that may, for whatever reason, not use the live version on accepted. There is a spreadsheet, but then orchestras would be responsible for tracking their own respondents to the survey and collecting that data themselves. And then we will have a method for orchestras to upload that data and send it to the league. But then in that case, orchestras would be responsible for collating that data themselves.
Thank you for clarifying that, Sam. Absolutely. Next question. Is it more beneficial for this to be executed through or owned by operations personnel rather than the EDI staff person? That is certainly a question for a particular orchestra to address for itself. My personal opinion would be that this should be a collaboration, that the personnel staff, the orchestra personnel staff, are the ones who are running the machine of hiring musicians, so we need them involved. If you are at an orchestra that has EDI staff, then please leverage that expertise and make sure that there's collaboration, cooperation, communication between those departments. Next question, can Canadian orchestras join the coalition? Yes, I'm happy to say yes. We are looking at what tweaks might be necessary there, but we did feel that that the opportunities available and some version of the same demographic issues would be relevant. So yes, this is open to Canadian orchestras, and we look forward to working with you to see if there's anything that needs to be tweaked that we have not yet thought of. Next question, how do you envision including AFM, ROPA, ICSOM? Thank you for asking that. It's incredibly important. We as the league and me personally have already spoken with representatives of all three. Tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, I'm speaking at the ICSOM conference. We have a standing invitation to all the players conferences and national to participate in any and all aspects of inclusive stages. I've been hopefully quite clear that it's our personal feeling that we cannot fully succeed in this work without partnership with the unions and the various levels of representation. And we hope that we'll find meaningful ways for all of them to be represented in our coalition meetings. That's my personal hope. It, in the end, is going to be up to the musicians and the union representatives to determine what their best engagement is. But please know that that is incredibly important to us at the league, to have union representation in this entire conversation. There were a couple, yes, question about the slides, we got that. One more question, how do you envision orchestras who have an EDI leader being involved in this? I think, hopefully I answered that we do see this as collaborative. Perhaps this could also be an interpretation of, for instance, the engagement list that we showed on the slide when we talked about what we would expect of orchestras. Those lists there were truly our bare minimum. So we would hope that every orchestra that has an executive director has them involved. Every orchestra that has a music director has them involved. And I think by definition, every orchestra has musicians, so we want them involved. That would be the bare minimum. There could be any number of other staff, other specific musician roles, other artistic leaders. There might be an assistant conductor, who knows? Whatever works best for that orchestra, we encourage anybody to be a part of this process that the orchestra feels is adding value to the process. So absolutely, if an orchestra has EDI staff, it would be great to include those EDI staff in the coalition meetings. That's only my personal recommendation. Every orchestra should still decide for themselves what is best. Well, yes, great. And please note in the chat here, we do have Annie from Accordant saying that if you have additional questions about the Inclusion Index survey after this session, please feel free to reach out. Her email address is right there in the chat, and we can also help make those connections. Another question, can board members be part of the coalition? Absolutely. Again, that will be up to individual orchestras. If an orchestra would like to bring one or more board members into coalition meetings, that is fantastic. So like with all the information we've shared today, there's relatively little that we are prescribing or requiring. And certainly any suggestions we have made, whether it's who participates or what actions we might consider, they are nowhere near an exhaustive list. This is a situation where more is usually going to be better. More options for action, more stakeholders. It really comes down to sharing perspectives, sharing information, and being committed to acting. This is not going to be a time where we gather a lot of information and decide there's nothing we can do. That's not going to be this project. So we are looking for organizations and people who are ready to work collaboratively and take action this year. I'll pause a moment for any last questions. We might get out of here a couple minutes early. We do also have a contact from Accepted here, and I'd welcome them to add their contact info into the chat so that that is available for everybody here. And of course, we'll continue to make that connection as well. So we appreciate both of our surveying partners, Accordant and Accepted. And I can personally tell you both teams are completely on board and engaged with this, and they are available to work with orchestras on this, and we're grateful for their partnership. I'll pause one more minute for any last questions. For those of you who have gotten your questions answered, I just want to say thank you for being here. I want to say that we do have a webpage where this information is going to be stored. It is americanorchestras.org/inclusive stages. We also have an email address, which is simply inclusivestages@americanorchestras.org. Very easy to use. I chose to put the website on the page just to focus your attention. That is the best place to get all of your information, and you are welcome to contact us. Both Sam and I are incredibly devoted to this work. I think we have personal motivation, we have professional motivation, we care very much about this, and none of that makes a bit of difference without you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Please give us your continued questions, your continued feedback, challenge us to do better, give us suggestions, bring us your problems. We are going to be in this work together, and I really look forward to it. Seeing no further questions, I think we will call it a day. Thank you again for your participation. We look forward to hearing from you. Take care.